stage of that work. And so there are some images here just to give you a flavor of the work. It was centered in the former wood shop of Ryan Middle School, which had originally been a high school. It was no longer used, so it was really just a storage space, a dumping ground. And we were given certain restrictions that some of the disabled shop equipment couldn't be removed, so it was part of the contract. And with very little money, virtually no time, and a whole bunch of eager students, we started that process with great concern that we would not get it right. That was, without a doubt, the biggest panic that we all shared, was that we would not get it right. And I think the response to the work gave me some confidence that there was a great deal of resonance with between what we were able to create and put forward, not as our vision of the community, but the community's vision, with how people understood themselves. So I just have 7 images here. This is the intro panel, and we took the character of the exhibition from the fact that it was in this woodshop space that was pretty raw. It was, well, that's an understatement. We presented in teams of students, interdisciplinary collaboration, 4 topics. The Third Ward history, presented through timeline and images and video. The history of the Ryan Middle School, Jack Gates Colored High School building community, which has a very noble pedigree, including participation of William Ward Watkin, many of us recognize his name. And then some of a significant part were the monuments, including not just Project Row Houses, Emancipation Park, but also the incredible number of churches that are active in the Third Ward, and the local celebrities and members of the community that had made it such a rich environment. We also had small vignettes, and one of them was this Sir Brown's Hair Palace, which we, in an abstract way, recreated in the exhibition. And we were very pleased that the owners of this hair palace, which no longer exists, visited the exhibition and held court within the barber's chair. And then the students from Ryan Middle School, with their teacher Anna Bass, were able to create visions for Emancipation Park's rebuilding that we included in the exhibition as well. So I'll leave it.
You touched on an aspect, and Nonya did too, about collaboration, and there's certainly the collaboration between the students themselves in order to affect a project like this. But I think one of the most valuable things that the students who've worked in this community have gotten out of it is that they've worked with community people. They've worked with Project Row Houses as a client. They've worked with people in the community. Even just being on the job site day to day, you encounter everybody who's on the street, and discussions ensue. And I think the students end up with a much better appreciation of how a community functions. I mean, the only communities they know are their schools, at Bryce and U of H. And to see how a real community functions day to day with all the various constituents and interests is a real educational experience that they take with them.
And I just wanted to talk about the younger students that I work with, high school students. The design competition that we do touches in neighborhoods all around the city. And for many students, they don't, like Danny says, they don't leave their school. Most of them don't leave their neighborhood. So getting them to investigate a part of Houston that they haven't seen before, we often collaborate with people in that neighborhood so they become the clients for the project that we're doing. And so, for example, almost 10 years ago, I think, one of the programs was to design a building for the bike workshop in its early inception. And so the students were able to come to this neighborhood. Most of them haven't necessarily been on this side of town. They were able to talk to the community, look around the community, talk with, I think it was Zach and the founders of Bike Workshop, see their enthusiasm, and really try to create a place for that organization in this community. And so getting people to understand, young people, so early in age to understand and be able to look around, see what's going on, listen, I think is very important. I really do feel that they appreciate that. And one of the fun things was coming back to the El Dorado Ballroom for the awards ceremony and having the awards being made by the bike workshop. And what's great about that is that legacy continues, because for many years the bike workshop continued to make the awards. So just always, the students were able to continue to see how that community work with community and collaborate together.
I am building a partnership with Project Row Houses, and hopefully in the future, in fact this semester we will be working closely with PRH. But one experience I like to share is the one that I had prior to coming here at Columbia University, where I was a visiting professor. I conducted a planning studio with a colleague, Peter Marcuse, where planning students, a diverse collection, if you will, or group of students, worked with us, and we advised them, in putting together a plan for building a movement around community land trust. And this kind of, this moment in time where the Occupy movement was happening in the city, the foreclosure rate was high, and as we begin to look at various models, one of the things that, for example, that we saw going back to the CLT movement was when you looked at foreclosures, less than half of 1% of foreclosures in the country were happening in CLTs, while in the market, at least 5% of market rate homes. We know this already. That's already been reported. Foreclosures were taking place. So they were 10 times higher. People were losing their homes 10 times more under the conventional market rate model than the CLT model. And so as we thought about, we looked at places in the city that had the highest rate of foreclosure. These were predominantly Black and brown communities. Bed-Stuy, East New York, Queens, solidly middle class Queens. People were losing their homes at astronomical rates. As we put together this, this plan, or this report, for a group known as the New Economy Project, what we found was the importance of organizing. Students learned as future policy planners the importance of organizing and working at the grassroots. I could go on, but I'd like to say that one of the important things is that working with the grassroots as allies, understanding the various players and helping to build a coalition. One of the groups that has picked this up, played a primary role in picking this work up along with the New Economy Project, was a homeless organization, Picture the Homeless. Picture the Homeless understood the value of shelter, going to this model of stewardship. You know, the house is more than just this financial wealth-building instrument, but it's about shelter. And that although we don't have it in this country, there should be a right to housing for all. They were able to build a coalition with other groups, community-based groups, citywide organizations, as well as faith-based organizations. So today, you know, I'm happy to say that an entity has been formed, the New York City Community Land Initiative, or called NICE. You know, all of these groups have come together, and they're doing a demonstration of the community land trust model that they're hoping will be replicated across the city. The demonstration is happening in East Harlem. So you can go to their website and see it. So I think certainly at Texas Southern, my students seem eager to be engaged in the community that some of them live in. And the importance of understanding the role that we play as allies. And as allies also, and this was touched on last night, building trust, getting to the point that there's trust. I think trust is really built on community understanding what your motives are, being dependable, showing your level of competency, and also being collegial, speaking nice and caring.
I have a question for Paul.
Hey, so there was an article by a guy named Ben Davis in the Socialist Review, and it particularly talked about Project Row Houses, and what it was called a critique of social practice. And this is a particular question to those who've been working on this project for a while. And one of the things that Ben Davis said in the article was that during the 20 years that Project Row Houses has been active in Houston, housing situation for low-income people of color in Houston has gotten worse, not better. And so how do you then, by the way, Ben Davis, I've talked to him since then, he does really respect Project Row Houses. He's using it as an exemplary social practice project. Nonetheless, things have gotten worse, not better. So when you're talking about this big picture, little picture, so what he's saying, this was published in the Socialist Review, this guy's a socialist, and he's saying, as long as you have this set of laws, and as long as we're in a capitalist, market-driven economy with no zoning in Houston, blah, 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 that things are going to continue to get worse no matter what you do incrementally in the community. So just wondering if you, first of all, is he right about that? It's gotten worse, not better in these 20 years. Maybe not particularly in these blocks, but in Houston in general. And second of all, how do you then correspond or look at yourself in the mirror and say, what I'm doing is valuable?
I don't have a mirror.
Rick, you ought to answer that.
Well, we've done it online. We've had a lot of conversation about that on what's it data.
So is the implication that the economic disparity between the richest and the poorest has not been expanding exponentially? It seems like that's where the problem is evident, and this is a symptom of the problem. I guess another way of asking the question, would it be even worse if Project Row Houses never existed?
That's the question Tom brought up in the argument. Online.
Well, I tell you, if you think too much about the largest issues and the largest problems, you'll never get anything done. I mean, the only way we do stuff, that we get stuff done, is just look at specific things right in front of us, hoping that little incremental changes, as Pat was talking about, may have some effect in a larger sense. But, I mean, we're just architects and planners. We can't solve those problems. Those are real problems, but...
Only Jeffery can solve them.
Like I said, I'm glad you're on our committee.
Okay, and I would say from the point of view of designing schools, often when we're sitting with our communities and we're talking about what they want, how they perceive their future, and I often have to caveat it by saying, okay, I can design what's inside the fence, but you guys have to make sure you're going out there and talking to your city council, and you're talking to TxDOT. We can tell them the vision for what we want. So making sure that the streets are safe to cross for the kids, making sure that, the school can reach out to the community and the community can reach back in, but it is a very difficult thing. So, what we do is we make sure that that community is connected to their city council member, is connected to the CIP projects that are going to happen, that we help create a vision, because very often there's not a vision there. You know, this is one of the things sometimes we worry about. We do things in spots, but we don't think about the broader effect. And so as an architect, as a school architect, what we try to do is say, okay, we're not the ones that are going to make it happen, but you talk to us about what it is you think it should be, what you want. We can make the points where that growth can happen, and then, you know, it's up to you to make the rest of it work. But we certainly do try.
And I think it's, in all seriousness, I think that's a very important question. I think, Danny, your comment is on point. Your comment is on point. You know, that as allies, we have a particular role to play. And often there are limitations in terms of what we can do. And as we begin the conversation, I think incrementalism, you know, versus policy development is something that I think the community and Project Row Process may need to think about in terms of going forward in the future.
Well, it's kind of interesting that last year when there was a series of planning meetings in the community to talk about affordable housing, they ended up always talking about education and police protection. And security and education are these two really fundamental issues in this neighborhood that always are considered sort of in tandem with housing, and they're connected to housing. But they're, you know, we design the house, but we can't totally fundamentally change the system.
Can I map out a scenario in my dream world? The scenario would be into Ryan Middle School is the influx of resources to create the Baylor Academy at Ryan, to create a middle school focused on medical arts. And it's currently a magnet open to anyone in the city. My dream is that that magnet would have a higher percentage of students from this neighborhood than any other. And that Project Row Houses and all of you can be agents in creating that situation, because of being able to prepare those students to compete on a level playing field. There are magnet schools all over the city that have local representation as well as magnet. And the school was transformed partly because there was such a low enrollment that students were not attending in large numbers. But then what a bridge to the Texas Medical Center for our students who are living, growing up in this neighborhood, to pass through Ryan on the way to DeBakey, on the way to Baylor or the University of Texas Medical School. Wouldn't that be a vision?
And I think to speak about the entrepreneurship that could grow out of something like that, a community recognizing that here being dropped in is this connection to this TMC, how then can the community feed off of what that is? How do they tie themselves into the school? How do you create a need for, I guess, whether it's a mom and pop shop, but those kinds of small entrepreneurial things that help make Ryan Middle School a sort of center for the community, and that's what schools often were. We just have to sort of rethink how that school functions when maybe you hope it's most of the kids in the neighborhood, but when it's not most of the kids in the neighborhood, how does the neighborhood tie the school back to itself? And thinking about what can we give to that school? What are the jobs that I can imagine? What are the purposes, the functions, etc.? I think there should be a lot of excitement about building off of what's happening there.
I hope I can make my froggy voice heard, so I'm sorry. But last night we talked a lot about community. Today we're talking a lot about planning and development, and I'm thinking about the bridge between those two. So my question is, sometimes change happens because external forces make it happen, development, economic crisis, etc. Sometimes change happens because of internal forces. People in the neighborhood go, oh, I want to move up and out. I want a better life than my parents had or my grandparents had, so I want to achieve upper middle class status and go somewhere else. So my question is, are the original community values still relevant? And if so, how do we keep those community values intact as a community changes racially and economically? Talking about the G word without saying it.
Minimalism, I think, is the word we used before. I don't know how to answer your question in a concrete way, except that it seems that having new families in the community here that already exists is a good thing. And there are places where you find long-term trajectory of values, and there are places where the impact of newcomers is felt more dramatically. I would expect that you would see more impact of newcomers in restaurants, perhaps in small commercial businesses, but in institutions like the park, the community center, the school, the hospital that was mentioned last night. Those are institutions where I think you begin to see a longer-term trajectory of history and allow for newcomers without completely upsetting that.
But the critical thing is that groups like Project Row Houses, let's face it, that's the institutional memory of this neighborhood. So I think we're all concerned that is endangered. And last night, the comment about organizing and collectively getting together, whether last night was to buy a building or to allow the stakeholders in this neighborhood to remain and to have a place, perhaps incrementally is all we can try to do at this moment.
I think going back to the stewardship model, what it helps and enhances is the ability to provide permanency in community. So as communities change, and we hope for the better, long-term residents and generations of households remain. When they remain, there is a better chance that the community, the existing or indigenous community values remain. The current process that we see, typically driven by the market, does not allow for that, and that's why it gets lost. We don't want the Third Ward to turn into, for example, in Memphis, Hill Street, where the only thing that's left other than Handy's house is a placard, a historical marker of what used to be. We don't want that. So what we need to do is develop models and advance policy to ensure that what we do value has permanency and some sustainability in it.
We're going to have one last question.
Yes. At age 11, it was my pleasure to live in the Burlington Shelburne area of Vermont. And of course, that was 56 years ago, at the beginning of the space age. But the state has a lot of free thinkers, and they're working towards single-payer health care, for example. And I rewarded them by purchasing my Mac from Small Dog Electronics, which is a Vermont company. But focusing on Houston, I see entire city lots being clear cut, forests of trees being cut down. And I would like to sow the seeds of thoughts or solutions that maybe there should be some kind of ordinance or regulation that the architects take a look at what is on the property before they demand a clear slate to design and build their shotgun condos or whatever. And if they do so, if they're going to use every square foot of the lot all the way up to the sidewalk, that there should be a requirement that within 400 meters or city blocks that there be green space, and something akin to what they've been doing in the Woodlands area. And another area I would like as a question to ask of you, we've touched a little bit on it earlier, but on the low income spectrum of renting and purchasing homes. It just seems that all this construction going on in Houston is aimed at high price condos and townhomes and so forth. There's nothing for the poor people who are going to be the majority. I've seen on the internet examples of tiny houses as a topic. Houses that are only 100 to 200 square feet, but creative people have designed a complete living space for food, utilities, everything within a small area for one or possibly two people. So I predict in this coming decade we're going to be going into construction methods that are different than what you see in Houston now. I mean, I see all these houses going up, not one of them has solar panels, but we'll go into modular housing. In other words, the whole walls will be constructed complete with windows, wiring, and everything to be assembled the way a child assembles Tinker toys or building blocks. And of course, they'll have the flexibility of assembling them in different ways, pre-assembled housing in that way. So could you address the concept of that low-income housing and how it can be worked into what we're discussing here today? Thank you.
Well, thank you for that. I hope you'll go on the tour today. We haven't achieved the 100 or 200 square foot house, but we have done the 500 square foot house, the extra small house, that was built by students for $25,000. And next to it is a solar house, completely solar evolved house. And then next to that is an investigation that our students did where they took a complete core that provides all the mechanical, electrical, and plumbing